Welcome, everyone, or welcome back to the DFL podcast. I'm here today with John Hetherington, is the founder of We Deliver Your Vision, a Calgary-based AI and technology strategy practice. He has over 25 years of experience leading digital transformations and spent over a decade in strategy consulting. So I'm really excited about this conversation. AI is top of mind for everyone. And actually it's June 12th. And so I must say that it's not really necessarily AI related, but we have a big IPO happening today. And I'll let everyone just kind of look it up themselves if they're not aware. So with that, John, why don't you take it away? Tell us a little about yourself and, and just fill in any gaps that I just didn't miss.
For sure. I mean, thanks, Michael. The introduction was awesome. So, live in Calgary, as you heard. I also have 3 dogs. Love training dogs, and I have 2 border collies and a German Shepherd, which we do agility training with. But
Wow.
that's my hobby.
Yeah.
And
It's like a half time. It's like a part-time job taking care of border collies, right? They need a lot of work.
And I love the lessons I learned from Kyla, my 4-year-old border collie, because she's all of it. Agility training, if anyone's seen it, where they do the jumps and the tunnels, it's all around guiding your dog. They want to work, they love it. But if you mess up, they mess up. So they're all looking to you to say, what do I do next? And it's a great leadership lesson every time we do it.
For sure. We had a Shetland sheepdog, which is sort of in the same, herding, family of dog breeds, and it's a lot of work to keep them well occupied, their brains and their bodies, so they don't do anything too bad to the house, and get bored.
Yes, if they don't have a job, they'll find a job, and if they can't find one, they'll create a job.
Indeed. Yeah. So with that, so John, so I want to talk a little bit about obviously AI, and maybe some of the challenges that people have as they try to apply AI in their businesses. And so why don't we start with just, if someone is a business owner or a leader inside of a business, and they've been given a mandate to, hey, you have to start applying AI to the business, and no more headcount. I want you to be not replacing people necessarily, but I want to make sure that we're deciding on every incremental headcount, can AI do this? And they're sitting here maybe know how to use spreadsheets and how to use Microsoft Office, but they're not technologists, individually. How does someone in that context as a business leader think about, diving into AI or stepping their toe in? What's that first step, and what would you recommend, I guess, just to get started?
Big question. And I get this a lot because typically leadership or board will say, we need to do more AI, go do AI. And that's a real difficult challenge for many operators, leaders, business owners. So I always rewind it back to where are you in your business? What do you want to achieve? What's the goal you're trying to get this year? Because knowing that will help you understand where AI plays in that picture. Because at the end of the day, AI is just another system tool at your disposal to help you grow the business and be more efficient if you use it in the right way. So the first question is the goal. What is the target or goal you want to achieve? Then the second question I like to ask is, if your business was to grow, because typically goals are around growth, revenue, reducing risk, what would happen if your revenue was to double? If your customers were to suddenly double their orders, what would break first? And then knowing that, you can then start to understand, okay, how do we fix this and where do we apply AI? So the first question is always level set around what you want to achieve. And then we get into the AI adoption. Does that make sense in terms of what you're hearing?
Yeah, it does. So why don't we start? Maybe let's do an example. So I'm, obviously we kind of exist inside of the real estate private equity world. We both, kind of, this is on the side of that, the podcast. And so, really thinking about how to apply it within a few different spaces, right? How do we help our operations team become more efficient and effective? And then also on the PE side, how do we either source better or more deals? How do we, increase volume or quality either in our acquisition of properties or the review of those properties, right? Due diligence and all of the things that maybe AI can help us with, document reviewing and all of that. And
Mm.
then there's the ops piece. So why don't we start with the PE side, and then we can move into ops because I think there's a lot everywhere, and we only have so much time. So I'm going to take
Yeah.
advantage of your brain here. So if you're, on the PE side, and I would say that business is a lot about getting results, which is about operations. We'll put that aside, but it's also about finding the deals and then, completing diligence. Presenting opportunities to potential investors, right? So there's materials there, there's presentations, there's marketing, and then there's workflows related to getting those deals closed and then
Mm.
operated effectively. So maybe if you could, in that space, what would you say? Where's a good place to start so far as a workflow or maybe a question to help focus a client like myself on, hey, let's focus on this because it's revenue enhancing, expense reduction, or whatever.
Yes. So again, great question. The first thing to understand is exactly what you said, the workflow. You need to understand the steps, business activities in your business. So you mentioned how start with the deal acquisition, the due diligence, going through the legal, going through the checks and balances. That needs to be mapped out. That workflow needs to be understood because back to the PE goal, which typically might be double revenue in 2 years, for example, or twice as many deals within 2 years. The first question back is if that was to happen, what would break first? So it
Mhm.
might be the due diligence process would be overwhelmed. It might be that we don't have enough lawyers on hand to step up and review all the contracts. It might be that we just can't execute on a number of deals because we just don't have enough skills in the team.
Mm.
So the first answer to that question of what would break first is your first point in the process to fix.
Mhm. Mhm.
So
Yeah.
once you know that, you can then deep dive into, okay, let's fix that first. And
Mhm.
then you can then start to work towards achieving that goal. So
Mhm.
picking an AI tool, and we can get into that in a second. But that's the first thing is understand what would break first.
Mhm. Yeah. So I think it's um yeah, obviously I would assume that's relatively different for each business depending on, where they're strongest or where they're maybe weakest.
Mm.
So I think that for a lot of folks, that act was the ability to underwrite deals is definitely something that people you know believed to be a throughput issue, right? To your point,
Yeah.
like there's only so many deals they can look at and underwrite and get through and pull the rent rolls and reformat them and pull the documents down, sign the CAs, respond back to all the brokers, manage all that communication. So I feel like people really concerned about that piece. So maybe we could talk a little bit about that
Mm.
and how what tools might be uh, easy for someone to adopt, right? Without having to do some big project necessarily right out of the gate. Maybe let's talk about that, the deal flow
Yes.
pipeline. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So once you have your deal flow pipeline mapped out, you have the process understood end to end. And that's a step off people often miss. And it's very important because then you understand, okay, first step of the process is due diligence. Then to your point, you get into rent rolls and the contracts and understanding what you're buying.
Mhm.
Then that's where you can say, okay, let's see where AI can help. A great example is AI is really good at repeating manual, repetitive tasks such as reviewing documents or summarizing complexity into reports. It might take rent rolls and put it into Excel, for example. So pick one step of the process. Might be say it's the due diligence document reviews or contract reviews. Upload all of those documents into your chosen AI tool, have it review the documents for duration of agreements, average rent prices, renewal dates. Then you're coming back with a good intelligence around your current situation of the contracts and agreements, and then have it summarize that. Then you can start to bring in the magic of AI, which is compare that to industry standards, understand whether the economy is going. So how do we adjust this? What changes do we need to make to these contracts to tighten them up? And then you can then take that back to your lawyers and your experts to check, because the AI is only as good as how you're holding it accountable. You need to have those checks and balances in place.
Hmm. Hmm.
So
So oh, go ahead, finish your thought there.
that's where I'd start. It pick one step of the process. Don't try and automate the whole process in one go. That's too much,
Mm-hmm.
especially if you're new to AI.
Hmm. Yeah, I definitely. So there's two things there. One is security, and so I would definitely want to talk about that.
Mm,
Before we get into the security piece, though, um, you know what we found in our organization, because we're definitely focused on giving our teams the tools to be successful and learn these skills and be prepared for whatever work looks like in the future, because it's certainly changing. Um, is you know especially with folks on the team that don't have all of the experience that they need in order to do something, the AI use can be kind of dangerous
mm,
because the AI, appears to do very sophisticated work, but very frequently that work is wrong, or incomplete or lacks significant context to the situation. And so a lot of times, and what we're really focusing on internally is really focusing actually on the manual execution of activities, because there's still like a training aspect involved with people
mm,
where we need them to understand how these activities are done. And we're finding that use of AI tools can somehow sometimes be a crutch for, I don't really know how to do this activity, but I can say what the activity is to my AI. It'll do something approximate to that activity, but I don't really know what good looks like. So
right.
I can't say if it's good or bad. And now we have maybe like an unstable work product that doesn't really pass muster. Um, that's definitely a challenge that I'm wondering, maybe if you could speak to that a little bit on how you're seeing, yeah, junior employees especially, and AI, and how they're interacting, and how do we maintain quality while also bringing these tools in, into the organization, because they're obviously very powerful, but not
Mm.
perfect.
Yes, and as you mentioned, it comes back to the prompting. How do we use the tool in the right way? Like with any, even riding a bike, you need to learn how to ride a bike to get the most from it. You're not going to suddenly be winning the Tour de France with as soon as you get on a bike. But same with AI.
Mhm.
So prompting it the right way, giving it the context, so the background to your business or your industry or your role to give it framing,
Mhm.
then the output that you want to expect, be it in a document, a summary. And this is where it gets tricky, because right now the AI models will share an amazing amount of data, amazing amount of responses. And that's actually churning and chewing up and costing you more money as it goes through all the tokens.
Mhm.
And we'll come back to that in terms of how you limit the tokens in a minute. But the answer is the last question, asking your AI to act like a cynic, acting it to challenge the response as though
Mhm.
you were presenting this to a board member or a
Mhm.
PE executive, and ask me to challenge this, identify the gaps, check any inconsistencies, and how can I
Mhm.
improve this? So constantly challenging the AI based on its responses is going to
Mhm.
give you a better result.
Okay. Yeah. So questions on that, but I promise we talk about security. So you had
Mm,
talked about taking documents related to transactions, right? Contracts or draft contracts, maybe even operating agreements and other types of sensitive documents, and potentially being able to obviously use those to create summaries or do quick, faster analysis than reading everything in a 300-page document, which sounds fantastic. But I
right.
know a lot of companies are, they have compliance, they've got legal, they've got sensitive, they could be regulated and have sensitive customer data. How do those companies, or those situations where they're very regulated, they have to control that information, how do they take advantage of the AI revolution without
Mm.
falling victim to compliance or legal issues?
Yeah. So I break down in AI into three levels of security and compliance. The first one is integrated AI tools. So this is Microsoft Copilot or Google Gemini, where they're already integrated into your office working products. So if you're using your business account to sign into your Teams and your Microsoft Office and you're using Copilot, you're integrated into that ecosystem. So that first level is like the security of an office building. Microsoft or Google are controlling the security to that AI tool, like an office building. You don't own that security. There's guards on the door. There might be badge swipe door access. It's fairly secure because it's integrated. The next level down is what I call home or house security for tools like Claude or ChatGPT. So these
Mm-hmm.
tools aren't naturally integrated into your office environment or your business environment. So you're more responsible for the security like you are your own house. You
Mm-hmm.
control the front door, you control the level of security. That responsibility is on you. The third level of security is more like a coffee shop. So personal free tools like Copilot free, ChatGPT free, the web
Mm-hmm.
browser free access tools are more like a coffee shop. Anyone can see what you're doing on your laptop. Anyone can wander in and see it.
Mm-hmm.
So using that analogy of the office security, house security, and coffee shop visibility is a great way to frame how you're using AI, but more importantly, which documents you're uploading to which tool. And always start with
Oh.
anything that's in your environment already integrated into your business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I guess then even if you're in this office, just to stay with your metaphor here a bit,
Mm.
you know, the office environment, in this case, all the paper in this building is owned by the building owner, right? So isn't there a data security issue in that you're sharing? I guess you're already sharing. The idea is you're already sharing this information with Google potentially, or they're promising that they're not looking at the information, and therefore, you don't have to worry about it. Just yeah. Is there any concern there when we think about sensitive customer information and using the tools that are integrated into the Google Suite or the Microsoft Suite?
So yes and no. I mean, you're already sharing information with Google in the cloud through the documents
Hmm.
anyway. So there's the element of security and access is within your own contract and agreement
Hmm.
with Google or Microsoft. The analogy of the office, though, is you're right. You are, but you're an office. You have your section of the office within the office building. So the
Sure.
security to
Yeah.
Google is the whole building.
Hmm.
Then you have individual badge swipe access to your office specifically in within the building.
Okay.
Can security get into your office? Yes. But do you
Hmm.
trust them not to go in and look at your documents? Yes.
Sure.
However,
Yeah.
to your point, you need to make sure you have the right controls in place. And this is where it doesn't matter if it's in a house, a coffee shop, or an office building, you need to have the data protection on it. You need to have the classification of documents. So your own internal controls are looking after the document. So if it's confidential, you know that you can't share it externally, and you know that if it does go externally, you can find it quicker. It's got protection on top of the document so it doesn't get shared, like emailing your personal account with a confidential
Hmm.
document.
Sure. Yeah, yeah. So similar levels of security as any other situation. These are just tools, just like you would think of any other piece of software in a lot of ways. So,
Right.
I guess, but as you're working with larger organizations, sometimes there's bureaucratic, burden, and maybe it's not as easy as those practical considerations. So maybe could you speak to maybe a real world example, perhaps, or something like that related to how organizations can begin to enter larger organizations that have these sorts of compliance hurdles and legal hurdles. What's the best way for them to start
Mm.
to attack AI, which is different than a startup, or you're just a regular person on the street. You can use whatever you want. If you've got where do you see kind of use cases actually moving into production for these bigger corporate clients, these bigger organizations, that we can look to and say, okay, hey, this is a safe area, this is an area where other people have been successful, because we're seeing a lot of on the news and such about these AI pilots not necessarily being successful all the time. So
Mm.
where are you seeing successful, production level use cases in corporations today?
So lots to break down there. So the first one is, how do we get the business on side with using the AI in the first place? The second one is then, how do you make sure it's successful? The first part around the engagement of IT or risk team or the audit team is, ask them around, do we have access to AI? And if not, why not? And if we do have access, what can we do? What can we not do? Because typically these teams already have a view on how we should use AI. Remember that nothing's actually changing with how we manage our data. Our confidentiality around customer client contracts is the same as it was 15 years ago. You don't send confidential documents to your personal email address. That's the same with AI. You don't put personal documents into the free tool. So, first thing is understand how the IT or risk team are managing AI. Second thing is, if they're not, or there's a limited pilot involved, is to start using it with a small group of people, understand the use cases and engage your IT team and risk team and in terms of how you're using it. So they see the results and they can track and understand which documents, which information is being shared and the results getting back. Then with the result of that pilot, you can then start to expand it. And this is what we've done with many clients to help them work through this. You start small and build it out with checkpoints, guardrails along the way.
Hmm.
So they have, and then you're sharing it. Back to the second point around, how do you make sure it's successful? You're helping people in the team understand how to use AI. So you're having regular sessions each week on, here's what we found in AI. Here's a great prompt that works. We were working with a law firm to adopt Copilot, and we actually went with the Chat GPT route, even though they had Copilot. And what we found is that one person was super enthusiastic about AI, couldn't get enough of it, and was coming up with great prompts. So we then had the weekly session to share those prompts with other lawyers. And
Hmm.
then as a result, they started using it more. You could summarize court documents for a roadmap for dealing with a case. They could create a timeline very quickly.
Hmm.
And as a result, the pilot for AI was more successful because they understood how to use it within their own company.
Hmm.
So first step is understanding what IT or risk have set up for AI. And the second part is set up these pilots with regular meetings and sharing sessions around how AI can be used best.
Hmm. And I know you just mentioned kind of an example there of a law firm and kind of solving a kind of some document or legal review with a summary and a timeline, which I assume was previously done by much more expensive labor. So you're solving a pain point for them or potentially right, and providing a faster solution. Um,
Yes.
is that typically like where do you typically it may not be a specific use case, but do you find that people are most attractive to hey, we can help you make more money per sale, we can help you make reduce headcount, like where or we can help you turn revenue over faster, like where are
Mm.
people able to justify leveraging AI? Because there's a lot of great things that we can use AI for, but I can't necessarily always point back to a specific savings or revenue,
Mm.
or even necessarily better work. I know I spent some money to use AI to do it, and I think overall it makes us more productive. But sometimes it's a little hard to to glean the exact benefit. So where are you finding the people are having the most success there, or
Yeah.
what types? Yeah.
So going back to the pilot example of the adopting AI, in those sessions, we're actually asking our teams, what were your wins this week around using AI? And exactly your point, it's not a specific measure of necessarily saving time, but what we found is, if anything, people were spending more time on the task, but they were getting a much better result.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
the lawyer example we were working with, he got a compliment from the court and the judge on how well he presented his case.
Hmm.
AI wasn't mentioned. AI didn't come into that discussion, but
Hmm.
the team had used AI to come up with better arguments, different perspectives, a better presentation.
Hmm.
As I mentioned, it was ended up being probably the same amount of time, if not longer, but the result was better. So it saves time to enable you to do better work, generally speaking.
Mhm.
If you try and attribute AI to saving time and hours, it's a bit of a slippery slope, because then people start to say, okay, what are you doing with that time? How are you spending it on different activities? And some people get very fearful for their jobs then. They say,
Mhm.
well, if I'm saving time and I don't have anything else to do, am I out of a job?
Mhm.
Plus, the other thing is the cost of AI. We have to be very careful right now around how AI burns through tokens. I don't know if you've seen how responses in Claude or Gemini or ChatGPT are very long.
Yeah.
They come back with,
I'm frequently saying, do this over and cut the text in half, like,
yeah,
yeah. But now I'm
exactly.
just paying for 1.5 times the output that ultimately, because I'm having them regenerate again anyway, right? So it's still getting
Yeah,
what it wants. Yeah.
I know. And there's the thing, because the cost of AI per transaction has come down dramatically. The cost of AI 10 years ago was hideously expensive, but now it's very, very cheap. A couple of cents per prompt. The problem is the prompt response then is much longer. So your cost of AI is actually going up much quicker. And
Hmm.
there's a couple of ways to actually control that.
Hmm.
You can select the model when you select different models to use in your Claude or your Copilot, and you can also select the effort it uses as well. So
Hmm.
for routine tasks, pick a lower model or a less effort, because ultimately it'll cost you less. Not everyone's going to do that. I get it, but
Hmm.
this is where it comes back to the company then reporting the cost per result. So there are tools out there which will show how much time and cost you've spent on a particular activity to
Hmm.
then tie it to a result. So it might be cost of ticket resolved from a customer service query, might be cost of contract reviewed or
Hmm.
invoices closed.
Hmm.
That cost has been attributed to a specific result to track the benefits.
Yeah. Do you have any recommendations, I guess, like as it relates to I think people are using this term of a harness, right? Where the models can everything, the knowledge base, all the tools and the various connectors, everything kind of lives in one space. And then, yeah, you can do model selection. Do you have any maybe suggestions on if someone wanted to try to, because I'm using Claude right out of
Mm,
right out of Claude's app, right, and it's always giving me the most expensive model as a default, right, Fable, whatever, five at
yes.
this point. And so, if I wanted to not have to think about that, right, and be like, I don't want to drop down. Is there a tool that I could be using that would kind of look at my prompt, understand, okay, this is not that complex. Let's make the decision on the user's behalf to help me
Mm,
save tokens. Because obviously Claude doesn't, that's not built into Claude. They don't want me doing that.
no.
So yeah, is there anything out there that's going to help me with that? Like sort of like it's almost like a low flow shower head, like something like that.
Yeah, you can't throttle AI models by default. So to your point, it is very
Right.
difficult to manage. The way we're going right now is, until they do have that situation, is because we want to encourage AI usage within the
Hmm.
boundaries of cost.
Hmm.
So we're using applications like Cloud Zero, which is very good at monitoring the cost per activity rather than just the cost per transaction, although it does that
Okay.
as well.
Hmm.
And so you can then report on how much cost your individual actions in AI are resulting in.
Hmm.
The other thing to
Yeah.
do is then you could also limit the number of licenses. So some people get the Enterprise Pro licenses, some people get the more basic licenses. There are ways to give different licenses to different people.
Hmm.
But at the end of the day, it's also education and guidance. It's a case of, oh, okay, here's the models, here's how you can use it, monitoring that usage. And for people who are having an expensive license but aren't using it, maybe that's reallocated to someone else.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
it is a difficult thing to manage right now, which is why reporting on the cost is probably the best thing to do. And
Hmm.
then ultimately educating your team around using different models for different tasks.
Yeah. Yeah, we're definitely yeah, it started more as trying to get people to use as much as
Mm,
possible, right? It was okay, if we give you this subscription, then I want to see, you hitting the limits actually. Like I want you to hit the limit of what, and then people would hit the limits on the second day of the week and then we're like, well, okay, we'll go to the next tier. But then, yeah, consistently monitoring that their usage, I think is, yeah, which is after the fact, but also, you can restrict, at least what we're restricting people's use of the API. So they're really restricted to more, because we're using Claude as the primary,
Mhm.
Teams and enterprise account, and using that, we're able to keep people at least to a fixed amount, most people, and then can kind of adjust as their usage, yeah, demands more, and they can prove that they're using it in a way that is beneficial, essentially,
Yeah,
versus
and
just kind of for no reason.
especially in Claude Cowork, where it
Mm.
can so Claude Cowork can go out and start pulling integrations and APIs from
Mm.
different tools.
Mhm.
There is a specific setting on only make sure that Claude Cowork can pull verified applications and integrations
Mm.
into your environment, because if you don't do that, it is going to start to pull in unverified applications, and that's where it
Mhm.
does get a bit scary and costs can get out of control because you don't know what those applications are doing with your data. So there
Sure.
are a couple of admin settings to make sure that you keep that controlled, and people can only go out and get extra add-ons and APIs and additional integrations once they've reviewed it with the IT team, or certainly a team to check that it's the right tool to use.
Mhm. So in real estate, I would say we're not necessarily like on the cutting edge of technology as an industry. I mean, maybe you see different in your practice from working with real estate folks, but a lot of the work that's being done in our space is in spreadsheets, and all the spreadsheets are different. And the data is not very well, the structured data is not very consistent across iteration, and there's a lot of, yeah, like memos and free form text, and so there's almost like it's difficult somewhat to apply AI without having really clean and organized data. And
Mm,
so I'm wondering, if you're working with a client that isn't very tech savvy, and they're maybe starting from a position of like, yeah, spreadsheets and things like that, or even worse than spreadsheets, whatever that might look like, paper, God
yeah.
forbid. Then what's there's a lot of work to potentially be done before you can really get to the sizzle of
Yeah.
AI. And so what would you say to make that a successful engagement, right? Because if you don't get to the win soon enough, then people are like, well, I don't want to keep spending money just to see my data be more organized. No one cares
Mm,
about that. They want the results. But how do you get
yeah.
through the vegetables so you can get to the prime rib, benefits?
Yes, love the food analogy. So, absolutely, you're spot on, and it goes back to a couple of things we talked about earlier around understanding your workflow. So, the first step is pulling your agree all the contractor agreements, rental agreements, understanding them into a report. Just pick one step. Don't try and automate the entire flow process in one go. Then, to your point around data organization, so AI can actually help with the organization of data. So if it is a messy spreadsheet, the
Hmm.
first thing you can do is have AI create the consistent format to then use in the reports, because not only is it the format, but it's also the access. So the biggest thing we see with lawyer clients and real estate clients is the documents are stored in different locations all over the organization. And you joke about paper, but that was a true situation with one of our clients. Is they had stacks of paper in the office. The partners and the lawyers loved printing out documents and reading them. That's what they were used to. So the first thing there is, okay, we're not going to suddenly digitize your entire company and organize your data, to your point. So let's pick one step of the process. In this case, it was invoice reporting. So given all the invoices, where are we today in terms of customer billing, and sending them a monthly update on here's what you've paid so far, here's what's left on the retainer, here's what to
Hmm.
expect in terms of what we've done on the case.
Hmm.
So it's taking a very small set of data and summarizing it into a very clear, concise report. Same with the spreadsheet data. So pick one,
Hmm.
get it formalized and formatted well, and then build on it from there. And then, to your point, you will get a quick win. You're then sharing that with the team, back to the regular meetings with the team on using AI. What are your wins this week? What have you used it
Hmm.
for? What have you achieved? And you'll find that it's not just AI, it's maybe better conversations with your clients, or you
Hmm.
spotted new deals that you didn't see before. but recognizing wins regardless of using AI or not is absolutely key.
Cool. So we've got about 10 minutes. I don't want to hit two more topics though before we are done. So one is going to be about, I think, I don't want to say humans versus robots necessarily, but I know that there's a lot of there's some concern, maybe warranted or otherwise, and I'd like to hear your opinion about robots taking our jobs, and then what Terminator scenario obviously is always
Mm,
top of mind for people. But we just stay in corporate world, corporate Terminators, right? Can I come and take your job or eliminate your work? Um, you know, Tell us a little bit about how we get everyone in the organization, on board for using these tools and to communicate that they're not necessarily about headcount reduction. They're
mm.
about they're other things, and so where do you find people are most successful in that communication, and where do you think maybe there are that some of the fears may be founded, right? In some ways, right? Some jobs are probably not going to be here in 10 years. That's always the
Mm,
case. But so how does that communication come off, and how can an organization be successful in that
mm.
way?
This is a valid concern. I mean, AI will change how we work, and as a result of that, there will be some changes to people's roles, which will result in some roles going away. I always go back to when ATMs, the bank machines, were first introduced. They suddenly reduced the number of bank tellers behind the screen serving you. And that, while that is true, banks shifted to different business models. The customer
Mhm.
service within a bank is much deeper now, much offering different services. But the ATMs, the bank machines, still exist, even though um, the new technology is there. The roles still exist in the banks. It just changed. So the conversations we're having with our clients is around, let's ask the team around, what are your views on AI? What are you using it for? And know that your roles will change, because the repetitive data entry and even some of the more advanced tasks will change, and some will go away. But there's opportunity to then build out your role into something new, something different. The good firms are leading that way and saying, how do we adjust our firm to cope with AI and leverage it and build with it? So the law firm now has AI issued to all of its lawyers and associates, and they're then using AI to effectively grow the business. They're able to deal with more cases. They're not losing any people, they're not firing anyone, but they're also not hiring anyone either. So, but the business is growing. But that's
Mhm.
giving the lawyers AI skills that they can then build their own careers and knowledge with as well. So they're growing personally.
Mhm.
So it comes down to that curiosity. How do I keep up to date with AI? It is being curious. I'm overwhelmed some days with the volume of AI change out there. It is a tidal wave that where it's more like a train now. I see AI as a fast moving train. It's a case of how quickly you can get on board. And so it's
Mhm.
inevitable. And the question is, just stay curious, just keep up to date, even if it's watching robots fall over on YouTube once a week.
Mhm.
Just understand how AI is changing our world, and just be curious and learning.
Yeah. No, I think what you had mentioned around, being able to grow, not necessarily, and upskilling and
Mm,
investing in your people, so they can be prepared for that new, corporate world, whether they stay with you or they go somewhere else, which is the same as how we've always existed as as an employer. Is like, you just try to empower your people, give them the resources they need, and if you treat them well, then you'll keep them. And
yeah.
humans are still very dynamic in their ability to execute relative to the Claudes and the Chat GPTs of the world.
Mm,
So that makes a lot of sense, and I think that echoes a lot of what we're seeing in our organization. I guess one more would be looking a bit to the future of what's coming next. I know everyone is. I think there's a lot of talk about agents,
Mm.
and the use of agents and how that's gonna transform potentially how we leverage AI and how organizations are able to leverage that. But maybe talk a little bit about agents and maybe what an agent is, right? Because I think there's a variety of different definitions, and then maybe what's next after agents. And you're bringing out your crystal ball here, right? But what comes after agents, and what under what time scale, and what should we be prepared for that might be surprising maybe over the next couple of years as it relates to AI.
Mm. Yeah, everyone's talking about agents, agentification, agentizing their business. And the definition I like to use is similar to driving a car or being on a train. So you may take a train from uh, two cities in the States, from New York to Washington. A train is on a track, it goes one direction, New York to Washington, destination is set. If you were driving from New York to Washington, which would be a little crazy given the traffic, but you have the choice. You could go and take a detour, you could stop along the way. So that's where I like the analogy of agents to AI. So AI is the train. You give it an instruction or prompt, and it gives you a response. Agents will be a little bit more creative. You give it a prompt or an instruction, and then it will start to pull in other knowledge and start to make recommendations for you. So, in a customer service example or a deal example, a prompt will say, analyze this deal and come back with the revenue projections. An agent
Mhm.
would maybe look at the revenue projections, go out to market and do some market research. It would start to look at other contracts. It would start to look at other deals going on. You can then start to frame out a response proposal. It would chain events together, so it's being a bit more, a lot more creative in how it responds. A great
Right.
example is bringing it back is booking airline tickets. I might use AI to find the best price on an airline ticket to New York, whereas an agent would actually book the ticket, book the hotel, and make some recommendations for restaurants to eat at. So it's building up that holistic trip as opposed to just the ticket price.
Mm. So there's something around like, yeah, decision making and taking actions,
Mm,
that kind of creates that agent, or I like the way you agentify. Agentify is the process of more of the
mm,
workflow.
yeah.
And so I guess then that just becomes like, it's just how long can that run, right? How many tasks and actions can that agent take
Mm,
before it needs to go back for approval, or right?
yes.
It's so because at a certain point, you take that to its end conclusion, and that's just what a person does as well. Like if you just go out and just continue to execute tasks
Mm,
until you're one on one with your boss next week, right? And so
exactly.
so, is how far away are we from maybe something that would uh, approximate a human's persistence, right? Like
Mm,
we can these agents can go out, or these when you prompt something, it might work for a few minutes, or even long, maybe even longer than that, um, maybe even an hours or whatever. But when will it be able to, in your view, either go for hours without approval? Um, in an effective way, right? An accurate way that actually makes sense. And then maybe like days or weeks where these agents will be able to work autonomously, and execute, full projects with, longer arcs, with, longer term goals, that sort of thing.
mm. So the short answer is they already can now, and this
Uh
is
oh,
a
watch out. Okay, no.
exactly. And but to a point. So, for example, I like to use the invoice processing analysis analogy because I do a lot of work with accountants. So, receiving an invoice in an email or through QuickBooks, it then takes the email, checks it's the right purchase order, checks the amount, the customer
Hmm.
reconciles it with the bank. So you can automate that entire process with
Hmm.
AI and an agent. But then here's where, to your point, the checks and balances come in. AI is like an intern or a new hire to your company. They're super keen, always available, never get tired, don't take breaks,
Hmm.
but they are infinitely intelligent, but don't have the wisdom. They don't have the context for your
Hmm.
business. So like an intern or a new hire, you need to have checks and balances, reviews. How are you doing? Are you doing the right things until you can trust it? So to your point now, we could set up an invoice processing agent. It would run forever, every week, checking invoices and reconciling every week forever. That's going to burn up your tokens really quickly with Claude Cowork or any agent you build. On the flip side, what we do is you set up what just process one set of invoices from one client, and as soon as you done the first step of the process, come back to me and let me know. I will check the result before you continue. So you're setting up these
Hmm.
guardrails. Say stop at step two, let me know, and I will review before you continue. So then once you know step two is done reliably, set a materiality limit. We only process invoices of uh, less than $5,000.
Hmm.
So it doesn't process anything expensive. So that's how you put these guardrails in place to make sure it doesn't spin off and burn up all your tokens and cost, but also
Hmm.
make decisions that are going to cost your business money as well.
Yeah. So very similar to how you train a new hire, and then you would think about levels in the organization and what decision and judgment levels you'd have at the associate, VP, president level would have different cost thresholds or approval thresholds, and very similar type of approach
Yeah,
to that.
Michael, exactly right. Exactly. You're treating AI like a new hire, and
Mhm.
based on the level you're bringing it in, the guardrails, the approvals, the experience need to
Mhm.
apply, and then it happens much quicker than hiring someone
Yeah,
because they
right.
learn very quickly, and you can give
Mhm.
the check balances within hours as
Mhm.
opposed to weeks or months.
Yeah.
But the same approach applies.
Yeah. So I remember 9 months ago when people I would listen to podcasts and people would say, "Oh, the coding performance is just so terrible. I just
Mm,
can't ever imagine a situation where we could write production level AI, be able to write production level code right out of the gate without any
mm,
problems." And now we're sitting here 9 months later, and we went past that so
yeah.
far as the ability of from a coding application, right? Obviously, the different use cases have different circumstances, but my sense is that we're going to have difficulty predicting the rate of change, continue to have difficulty predicting the rate of change, and it may not be very long before uh, what happened in coding happens in a lot of other domains, and so which isn't necessarily, I think, to me scary. It just means, hey, we can it means we can train those new employees faster. It means we can get
Yes.
to mastery of those skills faster, and we can have our humans on top of a suite of agents that are doing activities. But I definitely feel like it's very hard to even predict what I mean, just Fable 5 coming out,
Mm,
and the difference in the I know people are, think that it's not working very well, but at least for what we're doing, I find it's another leap ahead, and it just
mm.
gets me much faster results, much cleaner, much better context. And so yeah, I'm surprised by how rapid it's moving, but it's almost like it's I can't be surprised enough. It's moving so fast.
But
And
yeah.
so I don't know if there's any way to like kind of think about that. Like, oh, if you think it's going to take 3 years, cut it into 10% of that. I don't know if you guys
Mm.
you have like a rule of thumb on this, just the rate of change and how we can apply our lizard brains to that rate of change that's going on.
So, well, let's break it down to your coding example and then your own experience with Fable. So,
Mhm.
the coding example where a few years ago we didn't expect it to write production code. What's happened since, which most people don't appreciate, is that we have become better at controlling how it codes.
Mhm.
So, one agent or one AI creating code 5 years ago or 2 years ago didn't do a very good job. We
Mhm.
now, in our experience, we've done this. We have minimum of three agents that have a very specific skill. So the
Mhm.
first agent writes the code. The
Mhm.
second agent, its one skill is QA testing, validation,
Mhm.
accuracy. That's the second skill the code goes through. And then the third skill is production release, the GitHub alignment to make sure we're only releasing code is been reviewed properly by the QA, but also is executing the right code. So
Mhm.
between the code agent, the QA agent, and the production release agent, those specific skills mean we have much better success with releasing new code. and it's all overseen by a human. The
Hmm.
checkpoint is in every step to make sure it's correct, accurate, and not going to cause any problems.
Hmm.
So to your back to your point around using Fable 5, your experience with the previous models means you're now better able to use the more advanced models as soon as they come out. And
Hmm.
that's the journey everyone needs to go through. If there's one
Hmm.
thing anyone should take away from this podcast is that it's a journey. You have to learn how to use it like riding a bike. You
Hmm.
can't just jump into Fable or the latest version of Copilot or ChatGPT and expect to suddenly be an amazing $1.8 billion MedV company like
Hmm.
Matthew Gallagher with
Hmm.
two people. It it's going to take time and effort and understanding of how to use the tool in the right way.
Hmm. Yeah. Definitely I would yeah, echo that from chat gpt 3.5 and how well the model worked, as well as how well I was able to use the model, and just yeah, all the connectors and tools and things that you can do now, and then just yeah, the way you can try to keep the agent in check from kind of running away with its own self.
Mm,
Definitely is a learned process.
yeah.
So as we're coming here to the end, I'd like to maybe, if you could, last question, and then I'll ask where people can maybe reach you if they want to
Mm.
talk more about AI. And it sounds like you love to talk to accountants and lawyers, which are like, to me, that's not. I always put those meetings at the end of the day. So
Yeah.
but good for you on that, because yeah, there's a lot of great use cases there. But maybe just golden nugget. I know you've given a lot of great advice around how people can get started in AI, or how they can apply best practices. But maybe one more golden nugget just to leave folks with that you haven't mentioned. What's your kind of your best piece of AI related advice that you could share with our audience as one more golden nugget?
Yeah. Be curious and don't compare to others. There's a lot of marketing out there about this amazing use of AI and it's changing the world. And I can now automate my entire business and spend more time on the beach. And
Mm,
while that may be true for some people, many people it's not. We still have a business to run, we still have deals to make, we still have investors to talk to.
mm,
So AI can absolutely help that. And the best way to do that is just be curious,
mm.
understand what people do, listen to podcasts like this, reach out to people, ask questions, just understand where it's going, what it can do, and that will help you on this journey towards future proofing your career and your business.
Excellent. That was great. Yeah, that's a perfect golden nugget, because that yeah, everything comes from there, right? From the curiosity. So, John, I want to thank you so much for coming. Would you please just tell, if listeners wanted to get in touch with you after this episode, talk more about AI,
Mm.
or anything related to that, where could they get in touch with you?
Yeah, for sure. I post regularly on social media, so check me out on LinkedIn, John Hetherington. And if you wanted to reach out to me directly, feel free to drop me an email at john@wedeliveryourvision.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, John, for sharing that details. We're going to put those into the show notes. And I want to thank all our listeners for joining us for another episode of the Deal Flow podcast. And we'll see you next time, and have a great rest of your week.
Awesome.